Here comes the cross.
This is where the money's being made at right now.
Oh, Erin Eldridge is going to do the cross.
Oh
Okay.
boy.
Smartest move.
Yeah.
In my opinion. You can't have Frank or Larson, badger her down.
Yeah, but Erin is also going to come off as a...
Say it.
It rhymes with witch.
Oh, I was thinking of a
A
different
Nintendo Switch?
Yes!
Good morning, Miss Potter.
Good morning.
You've been a police officer, we're a police officer for 26 years. Isn't
Yes.
that right? You said you started in 1995,
Yes.
and that was with the Brooklyn Center Police Department for that entire career, right?
Yes.
And you said that you resigned from the Brooklyn Center Police Department, right?
Yes.
And that was on April 12th of this year, right?
Yeah, within a day or two of the incident.
Right after you had shot and killed Dante Wright.
Yes.
And
She's gonna
throughout
say
that
that
time
a
period,
lot,
you
I
were a
bet.
licensed peace officer, right?
Yes.
And to become licensed, you had to go through a number of requirements. Fair?
Yes.
You had a college degree.
Excuse me, Your Honor, the prosecutor speaking and that mic too.
Sure.
Thank you.
You have a college degree, right?
Yes.
And you also had to complete the peace officer education program. That's that skills component that you talked about.
Yes.
And that included skill sets and classroom training as well.
Yes.
You had to pass an exam to become an officer.
Yes.
And then you did all that before you started with the Brooklyn Center Police Department in 95, right?
Yes.
And then you got your license through the post board, correct?
Yes.
And that stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training.
Yes.
So you were licensed throughout that whole 26-year career, right?
Yes.
And you maintained all of the requirements to keep your license,
Yes.
including all the training that was required for it as well, right?
Yes.
And that training that's required for your license has all different kinds of components, true?
Yes.
You have things like use of force, use of firearms, tasers, all kinds of things.
Yes.
And you did all that training
Yes.
Taser,
you did all
tasers
that
specifically.
every year throughout that 26-year period, right?
Yes.
Sometimes multiple times a year, right?
Yes.
And all of those requirements were in place to make sure that you were at the beginning of your career and continued to be, competent and capable of performing the requirements of the job, right?
Yes.
You mentioned on direct that you were also a hostage negotiator as part of your duties, right?
Crisis negotiator.
Crisis negotiator. Did that involve some hostage type situations?
I've never had a hostage situation.
Okay, but crisis negotiation.
Yes.
And that involved some de-escalation tactics, I presume, correct?
Yes.
And you had to develop that skill set and be pretty good at de-escalating situations as a crisis negotiator, fair?
Yes.
So you had some experience in stressful situations doing that.
No.
So you were a crisis negotiator, but never experienced a stressful situation?
We talk to people.
Talk to people in crisis.
Yes.
And part of your job as a police officer is dealing with people on their worst days, right?
Yes.
People who don't want to cooperate with you sometimes, right?
Most of the people we talk to in crisis are either barricaded behind a door or talking to you from another room.
Okay. For 26 years, you were a patrol officer, right?
Yes.
So you saw people out on the street every day as part of your job duties. Okay?
Yes.
And you talked about doing a lot of traffic stops during that career, correct?
I did some traffic stops.
Okay. Well, in some of those cases, there are people who have weapons, right?
Yes.
Sometimes people want to flee, right?
Yes.
Sometimes people are violent.
Yes.
And all of that's part of being a police officer, dealing with people in those situations, right?
Yes.
You'd agree that you're bound by policy and the requirements of the job that Brooklyn Center, the police department, sets for you, right?
Yes.
And you heard Commander Fleslin testify, but you have to acknowledge those policies and essentially agree to abide by them every year you were an officer. Fair?
Yes.
And you'd agree that your fundamental duty as a police officer is to safeguard life, right?
Yes.
And you also have the duty to never employ unnecessary force. True?
Yes.
Part of the policy also includes some of your responsibilities as an officer, right?
Yes.
And that includes being alert and attentive and capable of performing your job, right?
I mean, this is what they taught her to
Getting
do, to
back
not
to
have bad words slip
The
out.
training
Just
and
stick to yes.
requirements.
no,
There's a lot of
as much as
training that
possible.
goes into being a police officer. Fair?
Yes.
To mitigate those other
we
two
talked
risks
about a
we
couple of
talked about
those
putting
things,
your
but one of
client on
those
stand.
subjects is use of force, right?
Yes.
And use of force can include things like restraints, handcuffs, defensive tactics, chemical irritants, using batons, tasers, less lethal weapons, and firearms as well, right? All those things are options available to you. True?
Not all of them.
Okay, well, you carry a whole number of things on your duty belt every day, right?
Yes.
And that includes a firearm and a taser, right?
Yes.
And you also had other items on that duty belt as well, correct?
Yes.
And as part of the training that you went through every year, they cover topics of all kinds of uses of force, right?
Yes.
Including the things on your duty belt and maybe other options that the department could use additionally, true?
Only the things I was assigned on my duty belt.
Okay. But in any case, that use of force training was a pretty key component of being an officer, right?
Yes.
You were trained about when you could use force, how much force to use, and what would be appropriate force. Fair?
Fair.
And not only were you trained on that, but you had a lot of policy that that dictated what you could and could not do in a particular situation, right?
Yes.
And you were also trained on the readiness aspects of use of force, right? Being ready to engage whatever force might be required, right?
Yes.
Including making decisions under stress, right?
What do you mean?
Well, you had a lot of scenario-based training, right?
Yes.
And in those situations, those scenarios were set up to be as close as they could be to real life, right?
I suppose.
So you would be trained to have to make decisions in the moment about what to do and what force to use, right?
Well, it was a training situation, so it was usually slow and meticulous and controlled.
Well, you did this year after year, right, for the entirety of your career, correct?
I think scenario-based training started later, probably the last 10 or 15 years.
Sure. But use of force training has been around for a long time, right?
Yes.
Because since you started as a police officer, you have, in some cases, had to use force. True?
Yes.
And there are limitations on how and when to use that force, right?
Yes.
So you've had training on that throughout your entire career, right?
Yes.
And as part of that process, the way that it's required for you to maintain your license is that you sign in and you sign off on attendance forms, and you basically, you have to be there, right? You can't not be there, right?
Right.
And every year you have a certain number of training hours that are required, right?
Yes. And
And you said on direct that you participated and you were paying attention during all those trainings, true?
yes.
And some of those trainings had classroom instruction, PowerPoints, things like that, right?
Yes.
Some of them also included reviewing policies and other documents, right?
Yes.
And then there was also the hands-on training with the practical components, things like using drawing weapons, things like that, right?
Yes.
And over the course of your career, you completed many, many, many hours of training, right?
Yes.
Would you say you were trained?
And in terms of credit hours, we're talking somewhere in the ballpark of 1,700 credit hours. Does that sound right?
I don't know the number of hours, but if that's what you have, that would be probably right.
No reason to dispute that your training hours would have been in the thousands of hours over that 26-year career, right?
Yes.
You indicated that there weren't tasers available
Less than
when
100
you
hours
first
a year,
started
though.
at Brooklyn Center. True.
No, they came in the early 2000s.
Okay. But in 1996, you had a firearm, right?
In 1995, yes.
Sorry, 95, and then you were sworn in 96, right?
No, I was sworn in February 27th, 1995.
Okay. So in 95, when you first started, you had a firearm available to you,
Yes.
and you were trained to use that firearm,
Yes.
trained how to handle it, right?
Yes.
Trained how to load it and unload it,
Yes.
trained how to draw it,
Yes.
right? And fire it, and how to safely handle it, yes?
Yes.
And that included when not to fire it, right?
I suppose.
And that training started at the beginning of your career, you said in 95, but continued every year up until the time you resigned, right?
Yes.
Now, you indicated that tasers came later, but you were first trained on using a taser in 2002, correct?
If that's what the documents say, I'm not sure when they came out.
And if the documents say you were trained in 2002, you then would have been trained every year thereafter, right?
Yes.
And you started carrying a taser on your duty belt regularly as of 2005, right?
Yes.
But at a minimum, in addition to all the other training you had, you would have had taser training year after year for at least the last 19 years, right?
Yes.
And the taser training that's required, you saw the documents that were in court, also requires not only it requires review of policy, right? The taser policy, right?
Yes.
And it also requires practicing those reaction side draws, correct?
Sometimes.
All right, if we could put up Exhibit 334, please, the last page.
Oh, don't hit us with the policy again, please.
But
Dear
upon the screen
God.
has already been
You
admitted.
know it's coming.
334.
Karen from HR is going to bring the policy
The
next.
very last page.
Would you agree that this is an illustration of you
highlight
shooting
the,
Dante Wright in cold blood?
Subsection C, please.
Can you reenact shooting
as
Dante
part of
Wright
the
in
taser
dance
policy
form?
includes that all training should include performing reaction hand draws or cross draws to reduce the possibility of accidentally drawing and firing a firearm. That's part of the policy, right?
That's what it says.
And that's part of what you're trained to do, correct?
We didn't always we weren't always drawing our tasers from our holsters. A lot of times we were in plain clothes during training.
Okay. Well, your policy that you're required to abide by, that you signed off
She's
on,
not the trainer.
requires that you perform
Exactly.
reaction hand draws. True?
No,
During
not
the training, yes.
It also includes the reason for that, right?
Yes.
And that's so that you reduce the possibility of accidentally drawing and firing a firearm, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah, that word reduce, though, is a big word.
Yep.
part of the reason for that
It doesn't
is
say it stops it. It's just can
weapons
reduce it.
confusion, right?
Yes.
And that was known in the field and has been known for a number of years. True?
I guess.
Well, you were trained on it, right?
We talked about it.
It was part of your PowerPoints, correct?
Yes.
You were made aware during PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint that drawing and firing the wrong weapon can happen, right?
We were told it wasn't something that they expounded on.
You were told that.
Yes.
And you signed documentation every year you were certified, acknowledging that you knew the risks, received and reviewed the materials required for you to carry that taser, correct?
Yes, I signed the document.
I don't think this is the nail that they think they're hammering.
No.
Now, in terms
Conviction
of
by PowerPoint.
weapons.
That's their case.
You were told
Reaction
over and over
side
that the mistake you
means
made
what
could happen.
for you.
That'd be my left hand.
Okay, you're right-handed.
Yes.
So carrying a taser, you have done for years on your left side, correct?
Yes.
And your firearm you carry where?
On my right side.
How many years have you carried your firearm and your taser that way?
My firearm for 26 years and my taser, according to your documents, for 19.
So as long as you've had that taser, you've carried it on your left side, correct?
In the beginning, I carried it on my right side in a drop holster.
And when did you switch?
When we were given new holsters,
And when would that have been?
I don't know.
Okay. But far before 2016, you saw the images that were up in court. Long before that, you were carrying your taser on your left side, correct?
Yes.
Years and years, right?
Yes.
But the expert testified you go back to the first training.
Yeah. That's the slipping capture. You go back to your original training.
We talked a little bit about reality or scenario-based training. When you go through those trainings, you have available to you all the options that would be on your duty belt, right? Although inert for the purposes of training, right?
Yes.
That's not true, but
No, that's not true.
no,
And
it's
the
not.
purpose of that training is to try to recreate real life stressful situations as best as possible to practice making those types of decisions in the moment. Fair?
Fair.
Let's talk a little bit about your taser. You'd agree that the taser 7 that you have and the taser you had before that has a safety mechanism on the side of it, right?
Yes.
And you have to flip it up to arm the taser.
Yes.
And when the taser is on and armed, it beeps, right?
I don't know if it beeps.
There's a display screen that turns on.
Yes.
And then there are 2 lasers with the taser 7 that appear on your target, right?
Yes.
A green one for the top probe, right?
I believe so. It was a new taser.
And a red one for the bottom.
I would guess so. Yes.
Well, you were trained on it, right?
Yes, but it was a while back.
Well, you were
Been a while.
trained in March of this year on that taser, correct?
Yes.
That was a
You
while
had
back.
to successfully operate and handle that taser in order to be certified to use it, correct?
Yes.
And you went through that hands-on process of turning on that taser and safely handling that taser in order to be certified, correct?
Yes. In March.
In March. And before that, you had an X26P, correct?
Yes.
And that taser also had a laser and a safety and things like that, right?
Yes.
The screen that turned on.
Yes.
And the taser, and that was the taser that you had been carrying for years before, right?
Yes.
Very similar to the taser 7 in that way.
Similar but different.
All right, so I'm going to put on the screen
Good answer.
next to each other, please, exhibits 210 and exhibit 212.
Again, in court, it sounds really easy to say, do you remember what training you did in March when it's December? But in reality, it's not that simple to remember what you did, what,
Now, this
8
is a
months ago.
picture, side-by-side pictures of you on April 11th, correct?
Yes.
And your taser is pictured on the left side of your duty belt, correct?
Yes.
And that's the way you'd been carrying it for years and years, correct?
Yes.
And your firearm you carried on the right side of your duty belt, right?
Yes.
And you'd agree that the standard procedure for a reaction side, left-hand draw for your taser in this case, would be to draw that weapon with your left hand, correct?
Yes.
All right, you can take that down. You were asked some questions on direct about spark testing, the function test of the taser. The policy says that you should do that before the beginning of every shift, right?
Yes.
And you didn't do it the last 2 shifts that you worked, correct?
That's what the documents say.
Right. You didn't do one for the last 4 of your last 10 shifts that you worked, in fact, correct? That's what the documents say.
Which dates?
You didn't do it on March 27th, correct?
I guess.
You didn't do it on March 28th.
Your Honor, I object to this cross-examination if she doesn't know. She should
All
know.
right.
She should have
Okay,
known.
one word objections, please. If she doesn't know, she can say she doesn't know.
The documents show that you didn't do a spark test 4 of your last 10 shifts. You have no reason to dispute that, right?
No.
And the day of this incident on April 11th, you didn't do a spark test that day, right?
No. According to the documents.
And even though, that day was a slow and uneventful day at the beginning of the day, right?
I don't know. I don't have a log.
Well, you told Dr. Miller that day started as a slow and uneventful Sunday, right?
I don't know if I did or not.
Council Sidebar.
Man, she just looks angry. Like the prosecutor, like she does not look good. I mean, I said it in the chat, but I'm convinced that, I know you guys think it's like woman on woman, but I think Rugrats or my uncle over there could do a better job. Like, I really do. I don't think she's doing a good job of this. And I don't think, and guys, I do not think a woman that needs to necessarily be there for a woman. I don't agree with that necessarily. So
how progressive of you.
They're playing the averages. They're obviously playing the averages. You'd rather a woman be beating up another woman than a guy beating up a woman. It's just the optics of it. So
Yeah, the problem is they shouldn't have had her beating her up from the start. They should have had her build rapport and empathy from the start. And then you subtly move into beating her up to the point where she doesn't realize she's being hit.
And who else is going to do it? You can't have Larson do it, right? He'll be throwing pens across the courtroom. You can't have, Matthew Frank just puts the whole courtroom to sleep for 4 hours.
Yeah, I mean, what about the other guy back there? Get him up to try. Give him a swing at the plate.
I think that might be the research team, the people back on them, that they're research people.
They should have had Ellison come up and do it. That would look really good right there.
Keith Ellison probably hasn't been in a trial in how many years?
Yeah.
the guy tells everybody else, you go do it.
Continue.
But his name is on this trial, right?
Yeah, he made an appearance at one of the first day of voir dire.
All right. So April 11th started as a slow and uneventful day, right?
I guess it's a Sunday.
Okay. I'm going to put on the screen exhibits 224 and exhibit 178 next to each other, please.
They should have told her not to fight. Of course, yeah,
Yep.
Sunday. Yeah, Sunday's an uneventful day, right? You don't try to win on every question.
Get her to agree.
Yeah.
Build
All right,
rapport.
Ms. Potter, on the screen are exhibits
Sales-
224
be a
and
salesman.
178.
A sleazy one.
You'd agree that these are photos of
Attorney.
your taser and your firearm, respectively, yes?
My firearm for sure. I'm not sure if that's the taser that was taken that day, but I'm guessing it is.
And you carried a taser 7 that day, correct?
Yes.
And that's what's in this picture, exhibit 224.
Yes.
She can identify her firearm specifically, but
now
not the
these
taser. That's weird.
items look different, don't they?
Yes.
Your Honor's argument is a
The objection is overruled. I think you answered. Did you answer? You may answer if you didn't.
Yes.
Interestingly, Earl
Just to
Grey
be more
wasn't allowed to
specific,
show her pictures of the taser.
The taser is
Yeah,
yellow.
that's really
correct?
weird.
Yes.
The firearm is black, correct?
Yes.
The taser weighs about half as much as your loaded Glock, right?
I don't know.
Doesn't weigh the same, correct?
Well, I want to know.
I don't know.
Testified too early, but I don't know.
When it comes to the taser 7 that you had just been
Oops.
recertified on or certified to use, your department used long range cartridges for that taser 7, correct?
I don't know.
You were trained to use it, correct?
I don't know now. I don't remember.
You don't remember being trained to use the taser 7 at all?
No, I remember being trained, but I don't remember today what cartridges we were issued.
Okay. So you went out on the street with a taser, not knowing what that taser did?
I would assume that on the day I worked, I would know, but I don't know. It's been months now.
Okay. No reason to dispute that the Brooklyn Center Police Department used long-range cartridges in the Taser 7, correct?
No.
And the reason to do that would be so that you could fire it a farther distance with your Taser, and you wouldn't need to approach someone up close, correct?
I don't know. I would assume so, but I'm not positive.
Well, that's why someone would use a long-range cartridge as opposed to a short-range cartridge, correct?
Yes.
And you've been trained on Tasers since 2002, correct?
Yes.
You know
But
how
not
they
on the
work,
cartridges.
right? And you know
Yes.
what they do.
Yeah, doesn't mean you train
She
on
actually was
cartridges.
only trained on one of the
Can
cartridges.
we
It's
take
on
those
the
down, please, and
document.
put up exhibit
Yeah.
The long range
weird-
cartridge.
She
It's
might
a
not
weird
be,
hill to fight on.
yeah.
I don't know.
They're trying to
enough
make it
about
seem like
tasers.
it wasn't a mistake. In other words, they're trying to say she should have known that she pulled the gun.
Okay,
Well, she should have known.
14 that's been admitted
I mean,
on the screen.
I don't think that's in dispute, but that doesn't get you to
The picture of
reckless.
Your duty belt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You'd agree that the holsters for your Taser and your firearm are different, correct?
Yes.
And your firearm holster is empty in this picture, right? There's no firearm in it.
Correct.
Is that this right here?
Yes.
The Taser holster is made of plastic, right?
Yes.
You have to push a button, this button right
And
here.
the whole point
rock
is she
back
didn't
to
know.
Get it out of the out of the holster, correct?
If you didn't
Yes.
know, it's not reckless.
Your gun holster is made of leather, is that right?
Yes.
And it has a little snap. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
And how does that gun come out of that holster?
With a hand.
Smooth like butter.
It would rock forward.
How do you pull it with your hand out of your holster?
It would rock forward and you would pull it up.
Okay. And the Taser, on the other hand, you would press the button, rock it backward, and pull it up, correct?
Yes.
All right, if we could take that down, thank you. Now, you testified that you have never deployed your Taser or your firearm while on duty out on the street, correct?
Not that I recall. I know for sure my firearm.
Okay. But you have drawn your Taser multiple times while on duty, correct?
Several times.
And you said that you did that as a way to de-escalate. I believe that was your testimony on direct.
Yes.
Approximately how many times did you pull your Taser but not deploy it while on duty?
For de-escalation, maybe a few times.
Now, there are
For 5
times
years or
that
so.
You pulled your Taser and didn't deploy it. One was in 2013, correct? No reason to dispute that it happened once in 2013 at least.
I would guess no reason.
There was a situation where one of your colleagues, a former officer, was hanging on the back of an individual, and you pointed the Taser at him, but didn't tase him because you would have tased your fellow officer. Is that right?
If it's the one I'm thinking, yes.
And instead of
She was on his back.
deploying your Taser, you called for extra help, correct?
Yes, and we'd probably continue to fight with him.
You never deployed your Taser then.
No.
There was another incident in 2016 where someone was not complying with commands to place them under arrest, right?
I don't know what event you're talking about.
Well, in this case, there was an individual who was struggling, a female individual. She didn't want to get in handcuffs, and then one of the officers took her down to the ground by force, correct? And you pointed your Taser but didn't deploy it, right?
If that's what the documents say. I don't recall the incident.
Okay. But you recall that you have drawn your Taser and not fired it in your 26-year career.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to talk a little bit more about April 11th. So on April 11th, you were serving as an FTO, right?
Yes.
And you said that you have done that for 10 or 15 years.
For many years, as I don't remember when I got certified, but it's been many, many years.
Okay. And you said that on direct, I believe your testimony was that you had knowledge to impart and that mentorship skills that made you suited for that job, right?
Yes.
So you were serving as Officer Lucky's FTO on April 11th. How long had you been his FTO?
I believe it would be 5 shifts. It would have started the Monday after Easter Sunday.
Okay. But you were essentially in a supervisory position, right? Serving as his FTO.
Yes, I guided him.
It's a big responsibility, true?
Yes.
You have to be a good example, sort of set the stage for what a good police officer should do in any particular situation, right?
Yes.
And to do the job of an FTO, you have to be really familiar with policy and training and proper uses of force, right?
Yes.
And you have to make sure that someone else is doing it all right too, right?
Correct.
And you testified that that morning, the morning of April 11th, you reviewed pursuit policy with Officer Lucky, correct?
That afternoon.
Okay. But that pursuit policy includes not shooting at the driver or occupants of a vehicle, right?
A moving vehicle.
And you told Officer Lucky, we're not in the city, right? Did you tell Dr. Miller that you told Officer Lucky in reviewing pursuit policy, you used the phrase, we're not in the city?
Because we're on Zane Avenue, which is in Brooklyn Park.
And why did you say that?
To remind him of geographical boundaries.
And you were also reminding him of the limitations of the pursuit policy, correct?
What do you mean?
That you can't just get into a high-speed car chase or shoot up a car without specific reasons, right?
Yes, for our pursuit policy limits what we can pursue for.
And a gross misdemeanor warrant doesn't qualify for a vehicle pursuit, right?
Not according to our policy.
And you had just reviewed that policy with Officer Lucky that day, correct?
Yes.
So getting to what happened with the stop, you said that there was a turn signal misplacement, perhaps. You saw the wrong turn signal. That was the first thing that you saw?
Officer Lucky saw it first.
Okay, so you didn't see the wrong turn signal. But after that, you saw the air freshener, right?
I saw the expired registration.
Well, you had said on direct that you would not have pulled that vehicle over, right?
Probably not.
And you said that you knew that there had been some delays because of COVID with people getting their tabs up to date, right?
Yes.
But you also mentioned the air freshener to counsel on direct, didn't you?
Yes.
But regardless, expired tabs, air freshener, this is the kind of traffic stop that is pretty routine for you in your 26 years as a cop, right?
No traffic stops routine, but it would have been something I would have done several times.
I'm sure you've seen lots and lots of cars with air fresheners and expired tabs. True?
Yes.
How many of them had warrants
And then
and felonies
the
under
decision
their
was
belt?
made to pull over the car. You mentioned that there was some information that maybe there was some other warrant that you learned about around that time. You didn't discuss any of that with Officer Lucky, did you?
He would have had the same warrant hit that I would have heard.
None of that was mentioned. None of it was even worth discussing with Officer Lucky at the time you pulled over the car. Fair?
I don't remember if we talked about it or not.
He already had grounds
In
to
any
pull
case,
over
you
the
pull over
vehicle
the
anyway.
car, and Officer Lucky approaches the driver's side, approaches Mr. Wright, right?
Yes.
And he came back to the car with a name, date of birth, all kinds of information, right?
I know a name and a date of birth.
Well, Officer Lucky told you that he believed him. He thought that essentially that Mr. Wright was telling the truth, right?
Yes.
And then when Officer Lucky put in all this information into the system, you corrected him, you admonished him, you told him he was doing it wrong, right?
I told him better ways to do it, probably.
And that's your job as an FTO, right?
Yes.
To correct him if he
You
messes something up,
admonished him.
right?
Yes. When there was an opportunity.
So you
She
corrected
chose
him.
that word.
He re-entered the information, and then you found out about the warrant, right?
Yes.
Now there was also a conversation about Officer Lucky code 4ing himself, right?
Doing what?
Code 4ing
Oh,
himself.
code foreign. Yes.
And did you also correct Officer Lucky for doing that?
He did it before he ran the driver, and he shouldn't do that.
And you told him that, right?
Yes.
Don't code 4 yourself before you have all the information. Something to that effect, right?
Yes.
Did you do that
And again,
because
that was
you're
your
a
job
racist?
as the FTO to correct whatever he was doing that was wrong, right?
Yes.
So you got this information and then made this decision to go arrest Mr. Wright, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't talk about going out there with guns drawn or anything like that. You didn't talk about using force on the approach or anything like that, right?
No.
And then Officer Lucky pulled or asked Mr. Wright to get out of the car, which he did, right?
Yes.
And you stood back and watched this happen, correct?
I was just a couple feet away.
Okay. But you didn't correct the way that had happened. You didn't tell Officer Lucky to move or to put Mr. Wright somewhere else, right?
I wouldn't do that to a rookie in front of a suspect.
Okay. But you didn't do it regardless. Didn't happen.
No.
And then as you approached and got closer, was there a moment that you got closer after things didn't quite go the way you had hoped they would go?
I got closer before that happened.
Okay. And you'd agree that you unsnapped your gun holster as you approached, right?
No, I wouldn't agree to that.
All
You
right.
made that up from a
Could
video.
Mm-hmm.
Put on the screen Exhibit 12, just the still image at 2:01.
Of course, just a still
You
image.
touch the top of your holster all the time, folks, just to make sure
And
everything's
zoomed in
okay.
on, yes, the squad car view. You see yourself in that picture,
Yes.
and you see your right hand on the right side of your duty belt.
Yes.
And is your right hand on your firearm here?
It's blurry, but it's possible.
Okay.
Aren't
You
you
can take that
clearly
down, thank you.
unsnapping your gun right now?
Pinch and zoom.
Yeah, print and zoom.
We have the enhanced image, Prosecutor Kraus.
I've never heard about enhancing.
so-
Hold on, I'm closing handbrake.
As you approached, and Mr. Wright got out of the car, was there a moment where it appeared that Mr. Wright was going to flee or attempt to flee?
When he started struggling with Officer Lucky.
Okay. And ultimately, was Mr. Wright able to get back in the car?
Yes.
You never saw a weapon on Mr. Wright, did you?
No.
Never saw a gun.
No.
He never threw a punch,
Never saw a knife.
right?
Never
No.
saw a
Never
bat.
kicked anyone.
Remember that? From
No.
Never said, I'm going to kill
Rittenhouse?
you.
No.
Never said, I'm going to shoot you.
No.
Never said, there's a gun in the car and I'm coming after you.
No.
Okay.
By the way, I would not, if I were the defense, have let them get away with there was no assault here. There was an assault. An
It's
assault
not
is simply putting the
uncommon in your
officers in fear of harm.
experience
Yeah.
To find someone
That's true.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a punch to the face.
Right?
Assault fear. That's a battery if
It's
you
not uncommon.
punch the face.
And you've done hundreds of traffic stops in your career, correct?
I don't know if hundreds, but yes, I've done plenty of traffic stops.
See, I'd be bad because I would have
And
said he
gross
sent me a
misdemeanor
text saying he was
offenses are
coming
not the
after
same as
you,
felony
actually.
offenses. Fair?
Correct. They're different order by the judge. For the
Less
crime.
serious crimes, correct?
All crimes are serious, but yes.
Well, in terms of the
Oh, crimes are serious.
laws of the state of Minnesota that you're duty bound to enforce, a gross misdemeanor is a lesser offense than a felony, correct?
Yes.
And you don't get to shoot someone because they have a gross misdemeanor warrant, correct?
Not for,
Correct, Your Honor.
Yeah, I would object to that.
Okay, the objection is sustained.
That's
The jury will disregard that question.
You also testified about learning about an order for protection, correct?
yes,
You said
Do you
it
get
was
to shoot
a
people for those?
temporary, one that you saw, correct?
I believe it was an ex parte order.
And essentially, the order that you're describing would limit contact between two people, correct?
Yes, in various ways.
It doesn't prohibit all contact with all members of the opposite sex, right?
Just certain parties that they're not supposed to have contact with.
Right. And you'd agree that half the world's population is female, right?
Bigot.
Thanks for
50%
presuming.
plus 1.
So just having a female passenger in your car is not in and of it and by itself a violation of an OFP, correct?
Cause to investigate.
It has to be investigated.
Sure. And you did not see a need to rush up to the passenger side of the vehicle and pull this woman to safety, right?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
It calls for an
Now, there was
investigation,
also some
not a seizure.
Yeah.
conversation, as you
You
saw in
can't
the
just
videos
do that, by
were
the way?
offered in court in this case, conversation about the Wright brothers. You made a comment about the Wright brothers joking about not the ones that fly, right?
Yes.
And then any concerns about whether there was some other Wright family in the area. Sergeant Johnson told you not that family, not this situation, right?
I wasn't sure who they were.
Okay. But he didn't cause you any greater, he didn't tell you this is the family we should be concerned about. We got to be worried about this guy, right?
No, he didn't say anything like that.
Okay. And when you got over to that car and Mr. Wright got back into the car was still running, right? It was running that whole time.
I don't know if it was on or not.
Well, you told Dr. Miller that the car was running, didn't you?
I don't remember that.
You told Dr. Miller that Wright pulled away and got back into the driver's seat of the car, which was still running.
Okay, then I said that.
And the entire time this is happening, you're standing behind Officer Lucky, right?
At what point?
As Mr. Wright is getting back in the car.
I came around Officer Lucky's left side to help him.
And you indicated that Sergeant Johnson had approached on the passenger side, but he wouldn't have been in front of the door because that would have been unsafe, right?
Yes.
I am going to put on the screen Exhibit 13, starting at 2:01:48. Just that. If you could just leave it with that time frame, please.
Someone in the chat earlier said showing a hand motion through a still frame. Brilliant.
Okay.
With the
Ms. Potter, on the screen we have Exhibit 13 at 2:01:48. I'm going to slowly advance the
It's like we see things in real life.
frames and then pause it periodically. So let's advance just a bit. Okay, stopping right there. At 2:01:48, do you see yourself here taking a piece of paper in your left hand?
Yes.
All right, now advancing to 2:01:49.
would you agree that your hands
please.
look like old lady hands?
Okay, now stopping at 2:01:49, do you see that you've transferred that piece of paper to your right hand?
It looks like it.
You can advance a little further, please. Okay, would you agree that the piece of paper at 2:01:49 is in your right hand?
I don't know where it is.
Is this the piece of paper right here?
Let's see. Yeah, it's a piece of paper.
All right, let's advance a couple more frames, please. Okay, stopping right there. Would you agree in this frame of 2:01:49 that the piece of paper is in your right hand?
Yes.
All right, and if we could
This is to show she dropped the paper.
Play stopping at 2:01:54.
She's going to put it back in her left hand in just a second.
Okay.
That's probably what caused the confusion.
A few frames,
The
please.
fact she had that in her hand.
Paper is in your right hand, correct?
Appears that way.
She may break down again in just a minute when she sees the gun.
And then at 2:01:55, you can stop right there. You've just transferred the paper back to your left hand, correct?
That's what the video shows.
Okay.
Why did you transfer the paper
And then
from your
if
left
we
to your right to your
could,
left?
Nazi.
fucking
Advance
No.
a few more frames, please. To 2:01:56.
Once again, life does not happen frame by frame.
Remember, there are 29 frames
Okay,
in
you'd agree at
201:56.
2:01:56. The piece of paper is still in your left hand, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's advance. Actually,
She
let's
does
play
not
until
want to watch this shooting.
2:01, please. Okay, so stopping at 2:02:01. You have the firearm in your right hand, correct? And you are pointing it directly at Mr. Wright, correct?
Excuse me, Erin, could we have a break? My client is,
Okay. Miss Powder, do you need to break? Okay. It's moving away. So, okay, members of the jury, we're going to break for lunch, and we'll start up again at 1:30.
That's a good attorney right there.
Yep.
Very good.
Very good attorney.
Very good move.
See her breaking down. Yeah. They go
Call
to lunch with her
attention to the
breaking
jury
down.
that she's traumatized by this event, that she knows she's screwed up.
It's hard for me to see a conviction from this one, guys. I just don't see it. I
I
understand
can't.
where they're going with it, but I just don't see it, because if this seems like just such a mistake. She made a mistake, unless they're saying you criminalize mistakes now.
And that will be a radical shift.
Yeah.
That the implications of criminalizing mistakes are catastrophic.
Yes.
Well,